Joining me tonight for some insight into the lengthy legal process ahead is former federal prosecutor Rick Convertino. Rick, as always, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sheena.
So this is difficult to follow at this point. This is now the third indictment in just 4 months or so. Very serious charges here, but tell me what you make of these charges, how they were brought, and what stands out to you.
The thing that stands out to me about this third indictment, the second federal indictment, is that Trump himself is charged singularly as of course, the sole defendant. There are 7 unnamed co-defendants, or I'm sorry, co-conspirators. I think that's important because under the rules of evidence, and in particular, Federal Rule of Evidence 801D2E, I know that's getting in the weeds, but that is the ability for a prosecutor to get in a co-conspirator statement that is not considered hearsay. So in the normal realm of things, a statement against a defendant by someone out of court, an out-of-court statement made to prove the truth of the matter asserted, that is the definition of hearsay. If that is typically done, that is not admissible evidence. So if a witness says, John pulled the trigger because I heard that from Sally, that is not admissible evidence.
Sure.
If a person is an unindicted co-conspirator and has the same type of evidence, that does come in. So it's a huge advantage for the prosecutor not to name that co-conspirator as an indicted conspirator.
We also know that the special counsel is seeking to swiftly prosecute this case. He wants this to be done quickly. How does that play into that goal, not having several other people involved in this case?
Well, there's another rule of evidence that applies regarding co-conspirators. If co-conspirators are indicted, they're tried jointly, typically. So if you had all of these unindicted co-conspirators charged with the former president, you'd have 8 defendants in this one case. And then statements made by one defendant against another defendant would not be able to be cross-examined unless the person himself testified. So there's a rule of evidence, it's called the Brewton Rule. It's based on a case from 1968, United States v. Brewton, that says that a co-defendant cannot testify against another co-defendant, and so that trial would have to be either severed, so there'd be separate trials for the same defendants, or the statement would have to be heavily redacted. That takes time. And so the more defendants that are included, the more statements that are admissible, the more statements that are attempted to be admissible, all of that has to be worked out in pretrial motions, and that takes time. So that is why I believe Jack Smith purposefully indicted former President Trump alone and had the other witnesses as unindicted co-conspirators. I don't think it's to make them flip. I think they all testified. I think they probably had orders of immunity. They testified under immunity.
You think that already happened?
I do think that happened, yeah. Okay. I don't think any self-respecting attorney would allow his or her client to go into a grand jury without either asserting their Fifth Amendment privilege or having immunity. And it's pretty clear that these 7 unindicted co-conspirators gave very telling, truthful, direct evidence against the former president.
We just don't know what that is yet.
Some of it we do. Yesterday we heard Vice President Pence say that, I mean, it was a very forceful statement. I'm sure he said something along those lines in the federal grand jury, that Trump came to him and told him to listen to his crackpot attorneys, and he said that the information that these crackpot attorneys was giving Trump was music to his, quote, itching ear. So it's clear that, at least from the charges, that the former president wanted to stay in power, that he wanted to hear statements from his attorneys that he could then say he relied on in order to continue his effort to stay in power. It's been over 1,000 days since January 6th, and there is still 71% of Republicans who believe that the election was rigged, regardless of the overwhelming evidence that's been publicly disseminated to the opposite side.
Let's talk more about the 4 charges he is facing. There's not a lot of question as to whether there were attempts to overturn the results of the election. How important is the intention, whether the former president knew what he was saying were lies?
Well, that's an excellent question, because that's the whole gravamen of the case, whether or not he actually knew that he had lost the election. And so in the indictment, it reads carefully. It says in the beginning of the indictment, former President Trump lost the election. Former President Trump knew that he lost. Those are the first two lines, knew that he lost the election. It then goes on to say that he has a right to disseminate untruthful information. He has a right to lie. He has a constitutional right. He has a constitutional right to say whatever he wants if it doesn't affect the criminality or the elements of an ongoing crime, which in this case it clearly did, according to Jack Smith and the special counsel.
What does he not have the right to do in this case when it comes to using the levers of government of the office of the president, as the special counsel is alleging, to force the result that he was allegedly hoping for?
Well, what he's alleged to have done is to impede, obstruct, and interfere with the legal process of counting the electoral votes by formulating this scheme or artifice to defraud in 7 states, including 84 electoral votes, to try and summarily change those votes from Biden votes to Trump votes. There was absolutely no basis in fact or the law, according to the indictment, for him to proceed that way. And he knew full well that he lost the election, but still attempted to impede and obstruct the rightful votes of the American people.
And of course, he does have the right to contest and to try to fight the results, which he did. More than 60 lawsuits were filed across the country by either Trump or his allies. Do those lawsuits play into this indictment at all?
Well, he did. You're absolutely right. He filed 62 lawsuits all across the United States. He lost 62 lawsuits. Not one of them was favorable to the former president. He even went so far as to hire an independent firm. He had the legislatures from Arizona allow this independent firm to come in and recount the votes. It was paid for by Trump and the Trump campaign. They did a recount, and they found that Biden had won by more. I don't know if you recall when that happened. So all of these levers were pulled over and over. There were politicians that told him that he had lost. There were family members that told him, this is all in the indictment, alleged in the indictment. There was the cybersecurity, National Cybersecurity Division, the Homeland Security Division, former Vice President Pence, several people from the Justice Department, including former Attorney General Barr, told him he lost. So he had all this information that he did not win the election, and he still proceeded with vigor to have that election overturned, and still does as late as this morning he did.
And of course, we know many people do hold the belief that we know it's not true, but there are still many people that do believe that he did win that election. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the pushback on this indictment right after the break. Stay with us. I don't know if there's been a better time to start a brand new news operation.
The newsroom was pretty much starting from scratch.
It's fresh, it's innovative.
Lots of energy, lots of passionate reporters.
Knowing what we're starting here puts so much joy in my heart.
We have reporters who are embedded in these communities.
We are part of the neighborhood. Our newsroom is part of your neighborhood.
Telling the stories that otherwise nobody would know about.
Now, AJ, you went to the downtown boxing gym and you really got to see how this gym is impacting kids' lives.
Yeah, Chris, as soon as I walked in the building, it was very uplifting.
It's a boxing gym, but it's more than boxing. You know, we do homework. We help them with the SAT.
When it comes to the weather, it's forecasting what's going to fall on your driveway, when is it going to happen, and how might it actually affect your day-to-day life.
Hundreds of people continue to call in reporting problems throughout the county.
Cleanup crews working all throughout Metro Detroit.
Get them down and get them cleaned up.
Local news to me means we're in your community, we're telling stories that matter to you, that affect you.
Well, we are rethinking the way local news is done in the 21st century and how to tell the most important stories in a compelling way.
Local news is all about letting people know what's happening in their community.
We're here to listen and actually hear what you're saying, and we're putting together a newscast that will show that.
I want to tell those people's stories because it's needed. Detroit is ready. Get ready, because here we come.
Welcome back. We continue our conversation on this latest extraordinary day in U.S. history, the federal arraignment of former President Donald Trump. Earlier this evening, Trump had this to say.
This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
Do you want these trials to happen before the 2024 election?
And a spokesperson for the former president spoke with media this afternoon, claiming that today's proceedings were the latest attempt to interfere with the 2024 election.
This is election interference at its finest against the leading candidate right now for president, for either party. President Trump is under siege in a way that we have never seen before. President Trump and his legal team and everyone on his team will continue to fight, not for him, but for the American people.
And with us still, of course, is former federal prosecutor Rick Convertino. So let's dive into some of these allegations. We're going to hear this quite a lot over the coming months as the former president is facing a number of investigations. What can you tell me about the cases and about the special counsel, Jack Smith, in this particular case, about whether this could be political?
Well, I don't know Jack Smith. Jack Smith was I think in the Eastern District of New York as a federal prosecutor when I was in the District of Columbia as a federal prosecutor. He then went to become the chief of the Public Integrity Section, which is a part of the criminal division in the Main Justice Department in 2010. I think he was there from 2010 till 2015, and then he went to The Hague and worked on international war crimes. So I know he's a very experienced prosecutor, a very experienced attorney, and has a plethora of, excuse me, my 8 concussions, I guess. He has a plethora of experience as an attorney across all matters of criminal law.
So let's talk about the timing. The former president is saying that there's a reason this is coming out now, that it is an attempt to interfere, as he is, and that is correct, he is the presumptive Republican nominee for 2024. What is that timeline like? Because I've heard from plenty of other sources, this was actually pretty swift, pretty quickly that Jack Smith brought these charges.
Well, the charges, I went over the last couple of days and I compared the January 6th commission, what they concluded to the charges that were disseminated in the indictment. And they're very similar. So I think what he did was pick up off of the January 6th committee's work. And I think what he did was just fine-tune it and locked in witnesses. Now that's hundreds of witnesses. And so that takes, hundreds of days. So we're talking about a lot of physical work, a lot of reviewing of documentation that came from the initial commission under oath, witnesses who did testify under oath. And there were new witnesses that did not testify in the January 6th commission that did testify in the grand jury. So all of that takes a lot of time. I don't think that it was a lengthy investigation at all. I think it was pretty quickly done, finely tuned. I think that the indictment was crafted with the one sole defendant specifically because of the co-conspirator statements and the Brewton issue that I think was very, very important in order to streamline it, in order to make it a quick trial and bring it, you know, within the Speedy Trial Act, which is 70 days.
Sure. There's been a lot of deflection going on, a lot of mention of the current president's son, Hunter Biden. We're not going to stop hearing about this anytime soon, but it's entirely irrelevant to this case. What role do you think any of the political headlines will have in these investigations and the prosecution going forward?
Well, last time I was here, we talked about Hunter Biden, and I told you that I think he has an extraordinarily favorable plea agreement and diversion. It's something I'd never heard of in over 30 years as an attorney and 15 years as a federal prosecutor. So it is very, very rare. It's seemingly, it looks like it's too good to be true, and if it looks like it's too good to be true, it is. I think the judge should have proceeded with that plea agreement. There was no reason not to, other than for some kind of political machinations, I believe, and so that's just being prolonged now. It has nothing whatever to do with this case, not in the least bit. But there is that effort to deflect. There's always an effort to deflect in high-profile cases. One of the most tried and true tactics by defense attorneys is to attack the prosecution and the integrity of the investigation. Now, often the integrity of the investigation is quite worthy of being attacked, and very often the integrity of the investigation has not only holes in it, but tunnels in it too. So that's what's going on here. I think that the defense will prolong as long as they can, and then longer if they can. The only hope that I see for a favorable outcome for the former president is to get elected as the 47th president of the United States, and then to take care of this through his executive branch powers.
I think we have a soundbite we're going to go to on this topic.
The fact that I am standing here for the third time in 5 months is not a coincidence. This is the Biden political lawfare that we have seen time and time again. It is a deflection from everything that they have done. And if you don't believe me, look at the facts. On March 17th, Hunter accidentally admits that it was his laptop from hell. The next day, DA Alvin Bragg indicts President Trump. June 8th, an FBI document is released showing that the Ukrainians paid the Biden crime family millions and millions of dollars. The next day, the Mar-a-Lago raid and the Mar-a-Lago indictment. Last week, Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal fell through when the judge realized it had blanket immunity. The following day, a superseding indictment against Donald Trump. July 31st, Devin Archer goes to testify in front of the House. That was only after they failed to put him in jail prior to the fact. What happens the next day? The January 6th indictment that we're here for today.
Now, the judicial system is famously slow and tedious, but I do ask this in good faith. Is there any possibility that there's any nugget of truth in any of that, that a direct consequence or a direct political move could be made that quickly? Charges are filed, some lever is pulled somewhere behind some closed door, and now we're seeing charges the next day. Is there any realm of possibility where that could happen?
Any realm of possibility? Yes,
How so?
absolutely true. Because there are times when the Justice Department does, as the term is used, weaponize its authority and power. That is clearly true beyond all peradventure. So there are times when they target individuals and use the full force and resources of the government to try and convict those individuals for all sorts of reasons.
Is it reasonable to say that might be happening here?
Is it reasonable to say? I don't think it is reasonable to say that it's happening here. I think that, and here's my main defense of that position, is that all of the facts in this case have been played out summarily in public. Mm-hmm. So these are things that, and it's like, it's almost the same reason with today when it was supposed to be this big breaking news day, and it just didn't feel like anything extraordinary. It is extraordinary. 247 years this country has never, ever seen anything other than the peaceful transfer of power from president to president. And we've seen marked examples of exemplary conduct and attitude because the country comes first. This is the first time that we've seen anything remotely like this, but it's all baked in. It seems like another day almost. Yeah, Trump got indicted again. And you know what? He'll get indicted again next week or 2 weeks from now. And maybe I'll be back here and I'll say the same kind of thing. But it's a remarkable, it's an extraordinary event. Like I said, 247 years. But all of these facts have been played out in over 1,000 days. Mm-hmm. And they're still replicated today, where you still have this woman who just was on seconds ago said, you know, it's a scam, it's a fraud. You're going after him because he's the leader, and et cetera. And so we hear that so many times that it becomes part of our, you know, we're inculcated, we're indoctrinated with this, and so it desensitized, and it sinks in, and it's sunk in hard with 71% of Republicans, according to the New York Times Siena College poll. And it's replicated on a daily basis. I mean, I talked to people today who, under no circumstances, there is absolutely nothing that can be shown to them or proven to them in any way that will dissuade them from being a full-blown Trump backer until their very death, I think. And that is the kind of attitude that we have today. So facts don't matter, trials don't matter, courts don't matter. We've been desensitized in our institutions and whether our institutions hold value anymore, the Justice Department, the courts. Now, I've been in that courthouse in D.C. many, many times. I tried the longest criminal trial in the history of that courthouse, 6 months. I was in trial there in a federal RICO case. Judges are quirky. Judges have, you know, judges will make decisions that will make you scratch your head. You wonder, you know, where their bias is from. That happens in every county courthouse, in every local courthouse, every federal courthouse. I mean, we appoint our judges for life. That's the only job I can think of where that's done, and that makes for bad politics, that makes for bad law, and that makes for bad outcomes in cases. No one in this country should have a job and guaranteed it for life. So all of these things that are going on now, and the challenges to our institutions that are common force every day, just make you, like you said, desensitized, and you wonder if there's the ability for any justice. And so all that questioning comes to mind every time someone raises it. There's people out there that grab onto it and use it for their own purposes.
All right, well, we are going to dive more into what comes next. The conversation continues after the break. I don't know if there's been a better time to start a brand new news operation.
The newsroom was pretty much starting from scratch.
It's fresh, it's innovative.
Lots of energy, lots of passionate reporters.
Knowing what we're starting here puts so much joy in my heart.
We have reporters who are embedded in these communities.
We are part of the neighborhood. Our newsroom is part of your neighborhood.
Telling the stories that otherwise nobody would know about.
Now, AJ, you went to the downtown boxing gym, and you really got to see how this gym is impacting kids' lives.
Yeah, Chris, as soon as I walked in the building, it was very uplifting.
It's a boxing gym, but it's more than boxing. You know, we do homework. We help them with the SAT.
When it comes to the weather, it's forecasting what's going to fall on your driveway, when is it going to happen, and how might it actually affect your day-to-day life.
Hundreds of people continue to call in reporting problems throughout the county.
Cleanup crews working all throughout Metro Detroit.
Get them down and get them cleaned up.
Local news to me means we're in your community, we're telling stories that matter to you, that affect you.
Well, we're rethinking the way local news is done in the 21st century and how to tell the most important stories in a compelling way.
Local news is all about letting people know what's happening in their community.
We're here to listen and actually hear what you're saying, and we're putting together a newscast that will show that.
I want to tell those people's stories because it's needed. Detroit is ready. Get ready, because here we come.
Welcome back. We continue our conversation about the third indictment of former President Trump. This time, he's facing some of the most serious criminal allegations yet. The former president's legal woes are piling up at this point. Again, this is the third indictment since April, when he was arraigned in New York on state charges in a hush money case. Then in June, he was arraigned on federal charges in Miami for his alleged mishandling of classified documents found at his Mar-a-Lago resort. He pleaded not guilty in those cases and was found liable in a civil case filed by former writer E.G. Carroll. Another indictment may be coming in Georgia now for his alleged efforts to overturn that state's election results. Of course, Georgia would be key to securing Trump's victory in 2020. It would have been. And there was that infamous call where he asked the Secretary of State, allegedly, to find him some more votes. Before that, he alleged thousands of votes were cast by underage voters and even dead people. Following the indictment, this is what Georgia's Secretary of State had to say.
I feel more sorrow for our country that we're going through this, because in effect what we're doing is we're losing time and wasting time. We have big issues that we need to be dealing with, and we should be really, building a unified, Team America. We all work together. May not agree on all the issues, but we agree on the big things, and we have, big issues that we need to work together on. And we got to accomplish so much more if we're working together instead of, fighting and dividing each other.
Former prosecutor Rick Convertino is still with us, and I want to dive into what is likely to happen next. We know that there's this Georgia case. The investigation is still underway. What do you expect to happen there?
In Georgia?
Yes.
I expect there to be a RICO indictment. That's what's been disseminated out publicly so far.
And what is a RICO indictment?
A Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Organization Act. A RICO case takes the actions of multitudinous defendants, and they can charge it in one group, and it's the enterprise. So it's an ongoing enterprise that's charged, like an Italian traditional organized crime family. The Gambino family would be charged, and then it's like a spoked wheel. The hub of the wheel and all of the spokes make up the RICO.
Okay, so potentially another indictment coming. As we've mentioned, these are piling up. People are becoming desensitized. It doesn't even feel like major breaking news.
This
is one of the most extraordinary things in American history.
Right.
You mentioned a couple of polls that have come out. Another one came out today from Reuters, and they found almost half of Republicans, it was about 45%, said they would not vote for the former president again if he were convicted. But that is unlikely to happen prior to this election, right?
Yeah, think about that. And I wasn't aware of that poll, but the Reuters poll said 45% of Republicans would not vote for Trump if he were convicted. Mm-hmm. That means that the overwhelming majority of Republicans would vote for Trump if he were convicted. Now, that is in and of itself amazing. It's absolutely mind-boggling that anyone would vote for any person running for president in this country if they were convicted. And so that attitude is so prevalent and pervasive that the only way I think that this country will ever see any semblance of a peaceful transition is if we continue with this legal process and he is either convicted or acquitted.
And what will this process be? Obviously, it's going to be a busy time on the campaign trail as things really heat up, getting closer to next November. But he doesn't really have an option here to not appear in court, does he?
No, he does not have an option not to appear in court. In civil cases, there is that option on occasion, but not in a criminal case, not for a substantial proceeding. And most of them are considered substantial proceedings. And so, no, he won't have that option. He'll have to appear in court. But what he does is he attacks and he incessantly, and attacking a prosecutor, I can tell you from personal experience, is never a winning strategy. If you're on the end of that, you dig in, you work harder, you work longer hours, you're more dedicated than ever, and it does become personal. And so anyone who tells you it's not a personal thing when those kinds of attacks occur, they're just lying to you.
And how about the judge in this case? She has ruled against the former president before.
Yes. Yes, this is the judge that ruled against him and said, the president is not a king and you are not the president. And very terse language, and he is going before her again. He's already said that she can't be fair. I think he mocked her in some way again today. Incredibly unwise. Now, the judge, the same thing as you or me. They're living human beings. They, as a law professor used to tell us, they put their pants on one leg at a time. And if anyone thinks that doesn't affect a person, judge or not, they're not being truthful. It does.
Any likelihood that the attempts to get the trial moved out of Washington, D.C. would be successful?
No, zero chance of that. Although I heard a radio segment with Prosecutor Bragg from the New York DA's office, and he said that he would willingly give up his trial date. I think it's in May. He's the first trial date, and he said he'd give that trial date up to the special counsel if it's in the best interest of the country. And so I think you could likely see that to occur, where this trial date in this new case, the conspiracy case, will be set quickly, and it may supersede that case in New York City, which is a ridiculous case. I don't think that case should have ever been brought.
Okay. And what kind of timeline might we be looking at? We know that it may be stretched out. There may be very specific attempts to push this and stretch it out closer to the election. How long does a case like this take to resolve?
In the normal scheme of a conspiracy of one person and 7 unindicted co-conspirators, there is not a lot of physical evidence. There aren't going to be expert testimony. There's going to be not a lot of authentication. Going to be a lot of transcripts that are turned over. So I don't foresee this would take, a long time. Certainly, it should be under a year before this comes to trial.
All right. Well, what an interesting year it's going to be,
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have you back plenty of times,
Okay.
I'm sure.
Thanks, Shana.
Rick Convertino, former federal prosecutor, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.